welcome. How are you? Put in the chat, send me a 5. Let me know you're here and you can hear me and that you're excited to be here. My name is Joyce Odedison, and I'm so excited that you're here with us today and you have made time. You have decided that this is a topic important and relevant enough for you to join. And for that, I want you to give yourself a hand. You are part of the solution. So when we talk about forging inclusive pathways, we are thinking about you and what you are doing and how you're doing it. So thank you so much. I want to say a big thank you to the diversity team department for putting together this series and bringing us to this great end. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. But let's dive into the topic today. So what exactly can we do to change where we are to where we want to go? So today, I want to talk a little bit about forging inclusive pathways for DEI. So it's creating an inclusive DEI pathway so that all of us, at some point in our work and in our life will feel that we are part of the community. You see, what often happens is our community is made up of people of diverse background. And just think of what your customers would feel like and the people we serve. To know that as a government employee in a government department, this topic is important and relevant enough to take time out to talk about it. There is not going to be a presentation. I'm going to be most of the talking. I'll share a few slides with you. So bear with me as we go back and forth. The slides are just to highlight some key points that I want to share with you. But today I want to engage you in dialogue. I want to give you an opportunity to start thinking about what does it mean? What does it mean to create inclusive pathways? What does it mean to really create a pathway of inclusiveness? And I just want to check and make sure that everyone is hearing me and you can see when I put up the slide that that's okay. So just type yes in the chat. Let us know that you can see and hear the slide and see the slide and hear me. Okay, I see some yes. Excellent, great. So when we talk about forging an inclusive DEI pathway, what we're saying is, I want to ensure that what I do from here, I want to ensure that my activities and my actions are conducive to forging an inclusive DEI pathway. So we talk about the diversity, the differences in our people group, in our workplaces, in our gender, orientation, lifestyles, and we respect that. But most importantly, that we are practicing equity and inclusiveness. Here are some tips that I want to talk about today. Some key pieces I think we need to really hone in on and put into practice. The first point that I want to emphasize is us shifting away from microaggression to microaffirmations. Then I want us to talk about moving from DEI self-awareness to DEI self-correcting and self-directing. This is where we move from where we are now to a place where we are making decisions that are powerfully transformative. Then we're going to talk about respectfully intervening in micro inequities and exclusive actions that we may encounter or observe or become aware of, and ask, what is my responsibility? How do I participate How do I make a difference? And then we're going to talk about some of the structures that we can create for critical conversations around DEI in our workplaces, as leaders, as employees. And then we're going to touch on how to practice DEI conflict management for healing and transformation. Now, we only have 28 minutes. So I'm going to speed through this so you can get most of my intention. Let's get started. So when we talk about shifting from microaggression to micro affirmation, here are some examples of what I see us doing. Some examples of how we can do that differently. Some examples of how we can be part of the change. I want to start by saying, let us think about the jokes we're telling. You know, the jokes that are making fun about others. And let's clean up those jokes so that we all have fun together. We're all happy. We're all smiling because none of us have to slink away feeling horrible and feeling demeaned because that joke really made me feel yucky inside. That's how we create those pathways. That's how we become the change that we want. That's how we remember and we make a difference for those who experience microaggression. The use of acronyms that you know others don't understand. And sometimes you might not even be aware of it, but check yourself, ask yourself, if I wasn't who I am, so I would say, if I wasn't Joyce O'Didison and the author of 6 books and know these subject matters, would I know these acronyms? Would I know what they mean? And so I remind myself, I need to stop using it. I never forgot that I was working with an organization and I was sitting in the room with the leaders. We were all at the table, and these were leaders of departments and decision makers. And I was there as the respectful workplace officer for that organization. I helped them deal with the challenges that came up and the diversity conflicts. And I had gone in to work with the leaders. And here I am talking about, you know, we should let the employees and students know about EAP. And I never forget the look of bewilderment on the face of most of the leaders until someone had the courage to say, what is EAP? Can you imagine my shock? Because I was sitting with leaders, the decision makers. These are the people who should be educating those they lead about employee assistance and family programs. And I had made the assumption that they knew what EAP was. You see, I wasn't just sitting in the staff room with just everybody. I was in a leadership meeting with the president and the entire leadership team. And they didn't know. Not everyone around the table knew what EAP is. At that point, the HR director ran out of the meeting room, got some brochures, and brought it and handed around to the leaders at the table. So never assume that people know what those acronyms mean. We need to think about others in the room. Interrupting others or interrupting someone when they're trying to probably speak, and English might be a 3rd or 4th or 5th language. For someone like me who only speak English and not even quite well, I am very, very admiring of those who can speak multiple languages. And it always irks me when I hear the comments, well, you shouldn't be here because you can't speak English, or you shouldn't be answering the phone because of your accent. We have to remember and we have to remind ourselves when these comments come or when these thoughts come to our mind to say, but I am not a perfect English speaker. How dare I have this comment? How dare I have this thought? And I need to cancel that thought. So I want you to practice that. Go ahead in the chat and type, cancel that thought. This is how we move from pathways to pathways. We cancel that thought. You can cancel that thought by ensuring that you replace it with a better thought, a more inclusive thought, one that says, I wonder how many languages this person can speak. Isn't that a more inclusive way to look at it? This is where we start to develop more micro affirmations and fewer microaggressions. And I'll move on. You see, when we practice micro affirmations, we want to provide clear expectations for those we lead. It's not assuming that those employees should know what to do. Joyce, they're adults. Well, maybe in their last place of employment, or maybe in their cultural concepts, leaders actually tell you what to do. You don't have to figure it out. And if you dare figure it out yourself, you might get in trouble. So you might have some of those fears holding you back. Very, very important to think about those things as a leader, as you are working with your employees, as you're working with your team, to recognize that you have a responsibility to ensure that you are practicing micro affirmation. You might want to ask, what is clear about these instructions for you? What is unclear, and what would you like me to clarify? What would you like to discuss? Provide opportunity for professional development. Would you like to improve in any particular way, any skill? Creating opportunities for others to feel valued and to know that they are of value. I notice you haven't said much, but I'm really interested in knowing what you are thinking about this subject. Very simple. And if we start practicing to cancel the microaggressive thoughts and replacing them with micro affirmations, we are on the path to creating inclusive pathways for DEI. I want to talk a little bit about moving from DEI self-awareness to self-correcting and self-directing. You see, self-aware is when I become aware of what I am doing or what I have said or what I have done and the impact. Now, that itself requires reflection, the ability to reflect on what I've done, what I've said, and the self-esteem to look at it critically. Because if I am suffering from low self-esteem, I may not have the courage to examine my actions as it needs to be. So the work that we do to develop ourselves allow us to have the confidence to look at our actions and to say, but I erred here. And here is an opportunity to correct. You see, it takes a sense of value, self-worth, self-esteem for us to be able to correct our actions. This means being able to say, I am sorry. Being able to say, I will do something different. Being able to say, this wasn't what I intended to happen. My action have caused harm, and I want to apologize. Can you please forgive me for the way this landed? Not that I intended necessarily to cause harm, but I'm taking responsibility for the harm that was caused because of my action. And that is self-correcting. You see, often I say sorry, and I've had a few of people in my network who say, Joyce, what are you saying sorry for? I say, I'm saying sorry for the way it was landed, the way it landed, the way the person received it, and the pain they endured by it, by the way they receive or perceive my communication or action. And so we want to let people know that our intent is not to cause harm. That's very important for psychological safety in the workplace. And I noticed when you went with the cloud, you were looking at the word cloud and safety came up. Psychological safety, well-being, those are important for us to feel at work. If we don't feel safe at work, we're not able to be creative, innovative, solve problems, and work at high performance level. The idea of being self-directing is when we have developed the neural pathways from self-aware to self-correcting to then be self-directing, meaning that I make fewer mistakes. I am more aware of who I am, what I'm about. I'm in tune with my sense of self-worth, my self-esteem, and I can correct at knowing that I am at a comfortable place where I make fewer decisions from a place of stress, and more decisions and actions are derived from a place of confidence and well-being, and so have less negative impact on those around me. And this is what we talk about when we expand into self-directing. The other piece that's critically important for us in creating that inclusive DEI pathway is to be able to respectfully intervene in micro inequities and inclusive actions when we become aware of it, when it's blatant and we can see it. I believe that these things are presented to us. There is a reason why you became aware of it. There is a responsibility that comes with that to say, is there a better way? Is there a way to cause less harm? Is there a way for us to treat each other that doesn't leave each other wounded and bleeding internally from the negative and the corrosiveness of our behavior in terms of our diversity, our race, our gender, our sexuality, our religion? Those things that we use to categorize the way we live and express our values have become weapons that we've used to segregate, to exclude, to punish, and that needs to stop. We need to be able to respectfully say, I do not feel comfortable with this. I would like to help to make this a better interaction. How can I support that? How can I support a more positive interaction? I want you to put that in the chat. How can I support a more positive interaction? Let's build those neural pathways. Let's start to implement those actions that will create a more inclusive pathway. And one more thing before we touch on our last topic here is creating structure for diversity, equity, and inclusive critical conversations. Too often, people are hiding when these matters arise. They don't want anyone to know what they're thinking. I don't want to be labeled. I don't want to be seen as racist. I can't. This employee is disrespectful to others. But if I say something, they might call me racist. How dare you think about yourself over the well-being of those who are going through the hardship of having to experience these derogatory behaviors at work. And when leaders tell me those things, I say, step up to the position you've been called to. Find your self-esteem, pull up your big boy pants and stand up. So what if they say you are racist? Your actions will determine who you are. Stand up for the people that you take on the responsibility to lead. Step up and say, I will not tolerate that behavior here because it's exclusive, it's derogatory, it's gender oppression. Whatever it is, call it by name and say, I have a responsibility to intervene here. I think it's time we talk about this and how it's impacting all of us. Because you see, when these things happen, it impacts all of us, even at a subconscious level. And so we have a responsibility to talk about it. We have a responsibility to sit down and have those conversations, create those structures, create those safe places, create those code words that we can use to let others know that our intention is to reduce harm. Let others know that we want to stay on the side of safety and psychological safety in the workplace. We have a responsibility to do that, whether you're a leader, a supervisor, manager, or just an employee. And yes, I'm a conflict analyst, so I cannot not talk about addressing the conflicts that come. You see, our very diversity can be the cause of conflict. And yes, when conflict arises, our diversities magnify. We start to see how different we are. We start to see how we don't see things the same way. And we have different values and we have different ideas, and your way is not as good as mine. That's what conflict does. So we need to recognize how divisive conflicts can be. And we need to step up to the plate and say, I recognize that our values may be different. Or maybe our lenses, the lenses from which we're looking at the situation, we're seeing different perspectives. And I am willing to look through your lenses. What do you say about it? I want to invite you, put that in the chat. What do you say about that? Invite. I want to invite you to see it through your lenses. Can I take a look at it from your lenses? I want to encourage you today, and I want to leave you with that thought that together our individual actions can amount to huge changes as we forge a more inclusive DEI pathway. Thank you so much.
What do you think when people must ask you, what is the one thing that I should be doing to move forward with diversity, equity, inclusion in today's climate? What's the one action that you would recommend for us?
I think it's moving from where we are to where we want to go, and which was the whole emphasis of this piece I just shared. Looking at what do we want to see as a result, and setting in our mind that we're going to determine, each of us, to take actions that will lead to that. So if you've experienced situations where your friends, people will tell me, Joyce, my friends were discriminated against, someone was mean to someone I love, or if you've experienced that in some way, then it's important for you to say, what can I do to ensure that that no longer happens? How can I ensure that I am not being part of that in some way, even on an unconscious level? I think if each of us decides to do that, we would be a lot farther ahead.
Speaking about the racism and unconscious bias, we ourselves as professionals who work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not the case that that everything that you have spoken to us today means that we've checked that box. We've had you were acronym. You had people ask what DEI, and so we were putting that into the chat and saying, well, actually, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, what do you recommend, Joyce, when we are moving through those moments and finding those opportunities to be self-reflective, but not critical, such that it would be debilitating?
It's important to remember that we're humans. I always say we have belly buttons, so we're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect, but we can strive to do our best. And that will get us to where we want to go. And others will see our work and our intention. And if we stay consistent, we would be successful. I think someone had a question in the chat. It says, how can I support a more positive interaction? I'm not quite sure who that was. It says JS. And I think when we think about positive interaction, we have to start thinking about what is it that, why is it important to have a positive interaction? And that's important because when we don't have positive interactions, we start feeling bad about who we are. When there isn't positive interaction, humans have this amazing ability to make assumptions, to be critical, and we actually start beating up on ourselves. It must be me. I must be horrible. It must be something I've done. And so we go and we actually become wounded internally because we're trying to figure out, why is this interaction so difficult? Why is it not positive? You see, I often say to my audience that humans were designed for love and dignity. That's what we were designed for. And when we encounter anything that's different from that, we start questioning ourselves. We start saying, well, it must be me. I must be doing something wrong, or something is wrong with my skin, or my hair, or my face, or it must be. And we start that process of self exposition and we just keep poking at ourselves, trying to come up with the answer. And most of the time, the answer is with what the other person thinks, their thought, and the actions. And so part of the self-esteem and the demoralizing impact of racism, sexism, and all the other isms is that people become wounded and we reduce the level of psychological safety. And Maslow hierarchy of need teaches us that when we remove safety, right? Safety, food, shelter, clothing, safety, those are the basic needs. And when those have been targeted or picked on or threatened in any way, we change. We're no longer who we were meant to be because we go into that mode of survival. And at that point, we cannot be high-performing individuals at work, and we can't be innovative because we're just in survival. And it impacts our well-being because, that part of our brain is on alert, and that increases the stress level. It increases the overwhelm, the burnout, and depression, mental health. A lot of these issues become closer at hand. And we become more susceptible to those because of what we're experiencing in our network.
Thanks, Joyce. We have another question in the Q&A. If we apologize to someone for how something landed and they don't take that apology well, is there another way to approach the matter?
Yes. First of all, don't just apologize. You need to acknowledge the hurt that you've caused, that you inadvertently or deliberately caused. It doesn't matter. It's the same hurt. If I burnt my hand on the stove cooking for my family, which I love very much, or someone burns me with an iron, it's still the same burn. My skin is going to burn because it's not designed for that level of heat. So whether your action or words wound someone emotionally, intentionally or unintentionally, you have a responsibility to acknowledge. It's a human responsibility to acknowledge the pain that they have endured. And nobody is going to ignore that when you genuinely acknowledge the pain that you have caused. But what we see is people are overlooking the pain and the harm, and they're going right away to say, well, I apologize. Can you forgive me? Let us talk. Part of that critical conversation is recognizing the harm and giving that person an opportunity to tell me how it feels. Tell me, is there anything you would like me to know? Is there anything you would like to say to me about the experience? Is there anything you believe I could learn from this encounter? But we don't do that. We just say, please forgive me. Oh, I'm sorry. And we just expect someone to take our apology with no understanding as to whether or not this was just an act or you genuinely want to learn from this experience so it doesn't happen again. Most people who refuse to accept apologies, you know what they say? It was just political, or it was just an act, or they're just making face. They're not really sorry. They don't really care about the pain and discomfort that I've gone through. And I don't believe that they will not do it again. So that's what you need to do, is let them know what you've learned, or ask them to help you learn from this experience so you can grow to what I just described, from self-aware to self-correcting and then to self-directing.
So we do have another question in the chat, but I wanted to follow up on that. If you are in that position where you do suspect that, and that type of apology may be perhaps less than genuine, or just oh yeah, okay, sorry about that, quick thought. Can you advise some ways to be able to be reactive to provide that learning opportunity that you just spoke about? Like how would you then engage with that person if you were on the other side?
Well, it's easy. It's just saying, what do you want to come out of this situation? What learning? Well, I speak of learning all the time, so it comes naturally to me. But I invite you, use it. Ask, what learning did you want both of us to get from this? Just ask the person. Might this be an opportunity for both of us to learn, to educate ourselves, me to learn more about the way you were looking at things prior to this, and you to learn the impact. How can we both learn and grow from this? And I think, transformational learning theory teaches us that it doesn't matter what you experience. It doesn't matter how difficult it is. Everything in life is a lesson, and we can learn from it if we allow ourselves to do that. And I think that's the trigger here. We need to allow ourselves to learn, because that's when we truly grow, and that's when we become self-directing.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat. It's asking for suggestions on working with employees who may refer to an aspect of diversity, such as religion, this is suggesting as a rationale for negative behavior.
I love that one, because in my work, I meet a lot of leaders, and what they say to me is that, Joyce, this behavior, this employee's behavior is intolerable, but if I say something, they'll say I'm a racist. And I said, no, you have a responsibility to identify the issue and to separate it from the person. You see, if I tell you that I'm a Christian, and because I'm a Christian, I should say negative things about people of different orientation or different religion, then something is wrong with my perspective of my religion. Every religion teaches us to be good to others, to be kind to others, to treat others with dignity. I don't know of any religion that doesn't do that. So if someone is continually using their religion as an excuse to be oppressive to different genders, or to be exclusive, or to discriminate against people because of their sexual orientation or their religious beliefs, then you can question that and say, look, work is not part of your religious practice. We respect your religion here and we respect your rights to have, but here is not a place for you to enact those parts of your religion against others, because the other person has a right as well. You see, my right does not cancel your rights. We have religious freedom for everyone. So the fact that I'm a Christian and that you might be of a different religion doesn't mean, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, doesn't mean that your right is canceled because of mine. We each have religious freedom, and that's granted to all of us. It doesn't say in the legislation religious abuse. It says religious freedom, meaning that neither of us have the right to abuse or exclude or mistreat others because of our religious belief. So in order for us to live in harmony, in order for us to get along and work in harmoniously in a work setting, we need to respect everyone else's right. It becomes very stressful when people are using their rights to cancel out others' rights. It doesn't really compute. So we need to ask ourselves that. We need to, as a leader, you need to have those critical conversations with that employee and say, you know, I understand that you have religious beliefs. I understand that you have the religious practices, but how does that cancel the other person's rights and the other person's privileges under the legislation? We're living in a civilized, in a democratic society where everyone's rights has to be respected. And so the workplace should offer that protection. Every employee should have the same level of protection under the Human Rights Code. So that is the time for a critical conversation.
That speaks so directly to conversations that I've been a part of, Joyce. I always fall back on this one quote that I'd heard: if your involvement in your social justice movement ends at your own oppression, then you're not doing the work. And so that idea of looking past that and everything that you've shared with us today. I'm going to invite our Aaliyah and Laura, our other presenters, to feel free to put your videos on if you have some questions as well. We have just a few more minutes for questions, and then we will start with our closing.
I'm just enjoying listening to Joyce respond to these questions. I'm taking notes, so I can't write fast enough.
That's fine. And I just noticed that there was a bunch of questions came in all at once. Okay, what would you suggest for those who have invisible disabilities or concerns to make people more aware of their needs without going into too many details?
You know, that comes up a lot. And with some of my clients, I'm an outside for the respectful workplace or the harassment, and they will call me for those kinds of questions. And there is reasonable accommodation, and there is the responsibility to maintain privacy. And if you have an invisible situation where you don't want, it's I have a limitation that's invisible and I cannot share with anyone, or I'm afraid of sharing with anyone, or I don't know how people are going to treat me. Sometimes actually we make so much assumption of how terrible it's going to be when we disclose that information. Don't go telling everyone. I see those people who come to, they come into the situation of, this person share my, I'm like, who did you tell? Well, I told Sarah, and I told Harry, and I told Robert, and after you told two people, it's no longer a secret. So you disclose with, and have a conversation with your HR or with your manager and say, this is my concern, and there is there a way? Is there an accommodation that I can have that would allow me to be able to work more safely, work more efficiently, perform at a higher level in the workplace? We've had many situations where employees had visual disabilities, they've had all kinds of disabilities that needed accommodation. That's part of life. We all have belly buttons, and all of us are going to need something at some point in time. Mental health has become a serious issue where 1 in 5, as we sit here, there are probably 100 of us here, and a few of us have a mental health issue. And that should not be something that we have to live in fear of telling others. We need to start recognizing that you can have a perfectly healthy, normal life and still be diagnosed and having mental health disease, but you can manage it with the right support and with the right intervention and accommodations. So what is it you need? Make a list. What is the pros and cons of telling the right people, not Jack, Tim, Harry, and Sally, but the right people, the people who have the power and influence to make things easier for you. Make a list of the pros and the cons and start write it out for yourself, because a lot of times you struggle in your own mind about it. It's really, you have to convince yourself that you can disclose to get the accommodation you need. So make that pros and cons list and then go through and identify the pros, identify the cons, and why you are going to disclose, what it would benefit you to disclose, and then make a decision based on that. And if you need more, speak to a therapist, counselor, somebody who can maintain your confidentiality and help you through the process of disclosure.
Perfect, thank you. We have a question. If a workplace is improving EDI and psychological safety, shouldn't all employees be required to engage and be educated in racism and discrimination? I find often people that cause harm really need to be in these sessions, and they're the ones missing. So is this the employer's responsibility? This is suggesting that training shouldn't be optional. And what about with the government of Manitoba?
I'm not quite sure what the government of Manitoba policy is, but I have some clients who are Crown Corporation, and they do have unions, and they have collective agreements. And what they've done is training is something that doesn't fall under the collective agreement. You actually are allowed to recommend training for your employees under a collective agreement. So a lot of our unionized organizations, we have a program we call the Interpersonal Skills Coaching Program, where they come to learn diversity, respectful workplace skills, and they are able to use that. And I don't know if other organizations might have something similar, but that's something that a government can do. So it's now part of the training. There's a workbook, there's an assessment they go through, and there's steps that they have to learn. So it needs to be not just training where they sit in a webinar and they can crew out, but actually it's a program they go through, and it's part of their development. It's part of their learning plan. And we've worked with those organizations to do that, because many employees who, as you said, needed this were sliding out of the education. And part of the process is they need a broader perspective. They need to start focusing on more things. We need to elevate their mind. And this process allowed us. So we've been doing that now for at least 10, 15 years with our clients. And we've had much, much success. And I recommend it to all my organizations to look at doing something like that. If you are unionized and you have a collective agreement, it is the easiest way to connect with those employees and to get them into a program. It's usually housed outside, so that it's not internal, we're external to the organization. And there are other programs like that that you could do, or you could create something for yourself where they have to go through that process. Ours is coaching, because they have to work with a coach to go through that. But we've had really great success, because you are very correct. Many times they are getting in trouble, or they are doing those things, and they would not volunteer voluntarily go. And many have said to me, Joyce, you've opened my mind to something that will never close again, because they just don't know what they don't know. And that's just the way life is sometimes.
Our next question is, what will you do if someone is avoiding you in the office because of how you look or your color? Can you approach this person?
Whew. Well, first of all, how do we know why they're avoiding you? We're assuming until they've done, and according to the legislation, even under Manitoba Human Rights Code, we are protected under the 12 grounds, but we do need to have some evidence that this is why they're avoiding you. We cannot assume that they're avoiding me because of my color, or because I'm wearing a scarf, or because my hair is short, or my nose is broad, or my lips are thicker. I can assume that, but it doesn't give me grounds for a complaint. And many employees will call and say, Joyce, this is happening. Can I file a complaint? And I'm like, well, let's look at that. And we have to look at that. However, what I would suggest is find a way to connect with that person, to show them who you are and to tell them who you are. And you know what? Sometimes people, it's okay that they're staying away from you. You really probably don't want to be close to that person because they may not be good for you or for others. And it's okay. I believe it's healthier to stay away from someone if you don't have anything good to add to them. So if someone is avoiding you because of anything you assume, until they verbalize it or they've taken an action to demonstrate that you are unsafe, or that, somehow it's because of one of your diversities, we cannot do anything to them. They can choose, because there are people of the same race, same color, same gender, and they just can't stand each other. There are personality conflicts where somebody might just not like me, and that's okay. We need to start recognizing that everybody is not going to be our best friends. So choose your friends and let the other people be. Find other people to interact with. Don't let that bother you.